Welcome to the Sisterhood of Sweat. Today's guest is Clint Ober. Clinton Ober is CEO of EarthFX Incorporated, a research and development company located in Palm Springs, California. He first learned of grounding when installing cable TV systems in Billings, Montana in the early 1960s. A decade later, he formed Telecrafter Corporation and built it into the largest provider of cable installation services in the United States. This company specialized in proper grounding of cable installations for safety and TV signal stability. In the 1980s, he turned his attention to the developing computer industry and partnered with McGraw-Hill to distribute live digital news services via cable to PCs. This led to the development of the first cable modem and an increased awareness of need for proper system grounding. Following a health challenge in 1995, he retired and embarked on a personal journey looking for a higher purpose in life. During his travels, he noticed people wearing plastic and rubber-soled shoes that insulate the body from the earth. He wondered if no longer being naturally grounded could affect us. The question led to an experiment that suggested grounding alone reduced chronic pain and improved sleep. Thereafter, he developed a working hypothesis. Earth grounding the human body normalizes functioning of all body systems. The body utilizes the Earth's electrical potential and free electrons to maintain its internal electrical stability for the normal functioning of all self-regulating and self-healing systems. Over the past 20 years, he has supported a host of research studies. Earthing Institute that collectively demonstrate that grounding alone reduces inflammation and promotes normal functioning of all body systems. Today, we dive into how Clint healed his body through grounding, how he discovered it, and how it has healed millions. We talk about his Earthing movie and also his journey to get rid of possessions, how he was living in a multi-million-dollar house and he had all these things, and he just realized that when he got sick and he wasn't feeling well, how things are not what really matters in life. And so he became a minimalist, and he talks about that journey and so much more. This is a fascinating episode based on real science and real results. And I'm so excited to have Clint on the show. And I'm also, after we talked, he's sending me a grounding mat. So I can't wait to try it out when I teach my yoga classes. So we'll talk more about that in future episodes. We're also going to give you a link to his movie and a discount code if you want to get grounding mats or pads or chairs or things to put on your hands while you're actually sitting or doing activities or sleeping or doing yoga like I am. So check that out. It promises to be a fascinating episode. Stay tuned. I am so excited to welcome Clint Ober to the Sisterhood of Sweat today. Welcome, Clint.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Linda.
Wow. So I have to say, I find this topic that we're getting ready to dive into fascinating, and it kind of is kind of a funny story, but when I was a little girl, I used to want to just go barefoot constantly. And my mom was very proper, and you're not to go barefoot. You're going to get your feet dirty. You're going to run your feet. I would get spanked. That's probably a taboo thing today, but back then I got a spanking. I would take my shoes off again constantly. And I think just innately it's within us to do what we're going to talk about today. So why should we all be running barefoot, Clint?
Okay, well, children still to this day, if there's some water in a sidewalk or whatever, they want to take their shoes off and they want to stand there and jump in it. I mean, kids are innately drawn to take their shoes off. So anyhow, I kind of have to start at the beginning so that the story makes sense. I mean, how this all came about, that's what people really want to understand, because today shoes are the thing,
Right.
and everybody's got at least 10 to 50 pairs. So, but anyhow, I grew up in Montana on a in our rural ranch environment. And when I was very young, I'll make this quick. But when I was very young, I was a cowboy, but not like Roy Rogers. This is some boy who sits on a horse and just rides around the cows and looks at them and watches them to make sure that they're okay, they're happy, and if one of them is bawling or not acting like the others, then you have to take them out of the herd, put them in a pen, and then you go ride the pasture and make sure that there's no noxious weeds. You test the water to make sure it's okay, make sure the grass is not too short, go upstream and check and make sure there's not a dead animal upstream. But you check out the environment to find out if there's anything in the environment that's causing that cow to get sick. And and the whole concept behind it was that, so I have this prevention thing. I mean, you look at nature, it's just a natural thing for me. But but anyhow, the concept is if you keep the pasture clean and pristine, then the cows will be healthy and happy, and you'll make some money. If they get sick, then you have to call the vet and the banker and give them the keys and say, we're out of here, because there will be no money in the business. So I have that little bent, and then I grew up with a lot of Native Americans, and Native Americans are, back then, now I'm 76, or 70, I'll be 76, but back then they were, they're very earthy people, and very close to nature, and everything is related, everything is your cousin, blade of grass, whatever, and it goes on and on. So I have those two things in my background, a very early childhood. Then when I left that environment, I went to work in the communications industry, um, and primarily cable television, translators, low power television, those kind of things. And in that industry, we had to ground everything to the earth in order to have um, clean, pristine pictures, good sound, good data transmissions, and so on. And before then, you had a lot of snow and all kinds of static and noise, a lot of issues with the signals. So, but anyhow, you have to ground everything to the earth in order to prevent static charges, or to, the quality of the picture, and also to prevent lightning, because when you have all these cables in the air, whether it's telephone cable or whatever, then the wind blows, that creates static charge on the wires, and then occasionally there's going to be a lightning strike, and it's going to hit these cables, and what it does is it automatically is looking for the path of least resistance to get to ground. And so everything is grounded at the pole, everything is grounded at the house. And before you run a cable into the house, you have to run a ground, connect it to the ground, the shield to the ground, and then you can go in the house and connect the TV. So by preventing that, then everybody's happy, nobody knows what's going on around them electrically, but you have good quality pictures and so on. So, but anyhow, I spent about 30 years in that industry, and it was second nature to me to ground to ground anything electrical. And when I was about 49, 50, I was living on a mountaintop in Evergreen, Colorado.
Oh,
In
awesome. Yeah.
a 5,000 square foot, one bedroom A-frame home. It was really a lodge, but I converted it. And so anyhow, that Christmas, I was 49, that Christmas time, I got very, very sick. And I kept going to the doctor, and they thought it was hepatitis or something from a Christmas party. It didn't. It wasn't. It kept not showing positive. So eventually I ended up in an emergency room, and they they went and they put me in a CAT scan and found that my liver, I had an abscess in my liver. And they asked me the next morning if I'd had anybody had bitten me, and I said no. And they said, have you had any dental work? I said, yeah, I had a root canal about a month ago. And they said it was related probably to that. And so anyhow, the good news was that they figured out what was wrong with me. The bad news was it had destroyed most of my liver. And so I went through a very traumatic period. And uh, uh, fortunately, a young surgeon came along and said they'd like to do some experimental surgery, which back in those days was they didn't know how much of the liver they could cut out, and they knew that the liver would regenerate, but they didn't know how much you could take out and survive. So they said I was young enough to get a new liver, but I didn't have time, so I had no option. So I let them do this, and they went in and cut out a big chunk of my liver, and I went home. And surprisingly, it took me a few months to be able to walk very far.
Oh, I bet.
And about 6 months, the liver actually grew back in size to its original size. It was a little different because it didn't have all the little pockets, but it had the same size. And it took me about a year to get my energy back so I could, walk, run, do anything. And but during that process, I well, anytime you come close to death, I guess, and I think anybody who's been there can probably has a similar story. But the idea is that you know that now that you're immortal and your life, you know, you think about what your life's about and who you are and how you relate to all of it. But anyhow, I spent my whole life prior to that time just collecting material things, working for money. I was king of the mountain. I was living on a mountain in Evergreen, and and I was in the communications industry. So I had done well, but afterwards I realized that because I almost died during that process, and afterwards I realized that wow, I need to make my life about something more than all of these material things. So
Oh, that's, yeah,
I
major
literally,
epiphany.
yeah, I literally did give everything away to my kids and whoever, and I went from a 5,000 square foot house to a 27-foot RV. I packed up a couple of suitcases of things, put them in the RV, and I took off. And I traveled for about 3.5, 4 years to national parks, just spending time in national parks and occasionally going and seeing my children, which were scattered all over the country. I had 4 daughters. And so, but anyhow, about towards the end of that period, I started getting antsy. I wanted to go do something, but I didn't know what to do, but I didn't want to get back into business and just chase money. So, but I was down in Key Largo, Florida, and I just realized that I had to go home, which was California, uh, Arizona. And so I took and headed back to the West Coast, went to San Diego, and I said, it doesn't feel right. So I went back to Tucson, didn't feel right. And one day that night or that afternoon, I was taking off and I was going to drive up to Flagstaff because that's more like Montana where I'm from. And so I pulled in on the way up there, it was getting very late and dark. And there was an RV park sign. So I drove up there and it took me into Sedona. And down at Oak Creek, I don't know if you've ever been there, but there's a little RV
Yes.
park. So I pulled in there, that little RV park, and I woke up in the morning and I looked out there and I said, I'm not leaving here. This is like living in a national park. So I spent about 2 years there. And that the time I spent there, I spent, I was retired and I didn't have anything much to do. So I started working with the art galleries and helping them light their galleries because they had atrocious lighting in all of them. And it was just a hobby. So, but anyhow, it was fun. And then one day had my little computer and I was playing with something and it kept crashing and I didn't know what it was. Well, I knew what it was. It was static electricity because there was no ground, and every time I would touch it, you get a little spark, and that was static. The weather was very dry that day, so I laid a piece of uh, conductive tape across my desk, and then I connected it to a ground, and then whenever I would get ready to touch the computer, I'd touch the tape first, get the charge off my body, then I touched the computer, and it was fine. Um, So shortly after that, I went outdoors and sat on a bench down across from Tlaquepaque. And this tour bus pulls up, and here's a Japanese tour group, and they're all kind of shorter people, and they were all wearing white tennis shoes, Nike type tennis shoes, and it just stuck out like a sore thumb. And I don't, because the shoes looked big, and I don't know where it came from, but intuitively I asked, I said, I wonder if there's a consequence to, us humans no longer being naturally grounded. I didn't know. So that night I went home and started measuring some of the electric fields, or the difference in my body between being at ground potential, earth potential, versus in my living room or in my bedroom and so on. So I found that there was all kinds of noise and electrical charges on my body. So I went and did the same thing in my bed. I put a piece of metal tape up and down my bed, connected it with an alligator clip to a wire, threw it out the window, connected it to a ground rod, and then I took the meter, and it was also grounded. And then so when I could hold the meter, I would know that if the voltage went to zero, then I was grounded, which is what I wanted to test. And that night, when I was doing that, I was just laying in bed watching some TV, and the next thing I knew, I woke up in the morning. The meter had slid down to my side, but I had fallen asleep. And what's unusual about that is at that time I was,
Not sleeping.
53, 54. And I'd had all the, I was a cowboy, first of all, and I skied most of my life. I had skiing injuries, tennis injuries, just cowboy injuries, just you name it. And then I had that surgery. So I had pain was just like the story of my life. And so I usually had to take Advil or pain meds sometimes to go to sleep. And so that was kind of unusual. So I tried it a couple more nights, and I started looking around on the internet, and I couldn't find anything to do with um, sleep and grounding. And other than in surgery, they will ground your body before they cut you open to do, cardio, any kind of surgery in order to prevent an electrical event. So anyhow, I played with it for a little bit, and then I had a couple of buddies that I'd run into there, and I told them about what I was doing, and I said, you guys need to try this. And so I grounded their beds, and a couple of days later, one of them comes to me, and he wasn't talking about sleep. He says, do you think this can have any effect on my arthritis? Because my arthritis pain dropped significantly. And I said, no, I don't think so. I think it's just sleep. And I didn't know at that time. And then all of a sudden I realized that my pain was way down. So I said, okay, there's something going on here, and I didn't know what. So I went down to Tucson, tried to find out some information down there. Nothing in the medical literature. If you look, the cause of pain, the cause of sleep problems, cause of MS, cause of cause unknown. Almost all medical conditions, the cause is unknown in the literature, or at least it was back then. And this was about 1999 era, and the internet was very challenging back then. AOL, and that was about it. So anyhow, once I realized that, I said, there's something really going on here, and it's important. So I said, I can't find anything here. So I packed up everything, and I went to California, and I went straight to UCLA. I told them what I was doing, told them I wanted to learn more about it, and if not, do a study and figure out what this is all about and why it's, people need to know about this. And so when I got there, they said, you expect us to believe that you can drive a nail in the ground, tie a wire around it, and then tie it around somebody's toe, they're going to sleep better? They said, get out of here, you're nuts. So anyhow, in the process, I met a couple of youngsters there, young fellows there, and I invited them to help me with a study. So we pulled together our own study, and we found 60 people, grounded half of them, and did a controlled study. We had a nurse do most of the interface, and then all I did was go out and put the mats. I had to make up ground planes in order to ground people. And the only way we could ground people is during sleep, because during the day, everybody's running around, moving around. So I made up 60 mats, and 30 of them were live. They worked. 30 of them were dummies. So they had a control. Then we went out and found the subjects. Couldn't get them from the medical community, so we had to get them from beauty salons, because all the women would talk about they couldn't sleep or pain or whatever. And so they were more than happy to participate. And then in that process, just a couple of, to tell you, so I can explain what grounding is about. During that process, I thought that all of this electrical noise in our environments, electromagnetic interference, that's what it is in the communications industry. I thought, well, these electrical signals and environmental electrical signals were affecting our nervous system or affecting our bodies. And I didn't really know what the mechanism of action was or anything at that point. So one day they gave me a couple of people to go out and install these mats. And each time I would measure the noise in their room, their bedrooms, and then I would put the patch or the mat underneath the on the top of the mattress over under the sheet, and then measure the difference in electrical noise when they were touching the pad. And so that one day, and the reason I bring this up is because one day there were two people, and both of them were live pads, and one of them was a 70-year-old male, and he had terrible arthritis, cardiovascular health issues, and so on, and just he was in trouble.
Yeah.
So, but when I went into his bedroom to ground him, there were no electric fields. It was an Adobe type home, no wiring in the walls on the side of his bed, no lamps, nothing electrical near his bed. So there was no electrical noise. And I thought, well, this is kind of going to be a challenge, because I mean, we're not going to get any results out of this guy. It's unfortunate. And then I went across town and grounded a woman who was a similar age, had similar conditions, arthritis, cardiovascular, all the normal health. These people were in their pushing 80s. And she had like 20 volts of charge on her body. And I thought, wow, she's going to be a real good candidate. So grounded her and everything. So anyhow, about a month later, when they went to collect the data, and I was just looking at the data afterwards, and I looked at these two individuals, and they both had the same results. One of them, I mean, they both had significant reduction of pain. And back then, inflammation was not a term that anybody knew. And slept better, felt better, good energy, and so on. And I said, this can't be, because one of them didn't have any electrical noise in their bedroom, and the other had extreme electrical noise. So then I did a little further testing, and then I realized that, okay, there's another mechanism involved here. It's not just reducing and preventing electric fields. When you're grounded, when you're not grounded, you're an antenna for all this electrical noise. But as soon as you get grounded, then it prevents those fields from affecting you. So I said, okay, there's something else going on here. And then I went and did a little homework, and I recognized that, the Earth is negative 20 millivolts. And I hate to get techie on you, tech talk, but that means that the Earth is negative, and electrons can, are free to move and reduce charge. That's why we ground everything electrical to the Earth. Prevent static electricity, to prevent lightning from doing damage, creating a fire, and so on. So I just said, okay, well, it has to have something to do with the negative charge of the Earth. So I went on a little further and did another study with was able to get some medical people involved and help with the studies and so on. And then one day, one of the docs that I was working with, he didn't really understand. He said, okay, we have results here, but I don't understand the mechanism. So a doctor by the name of Steven Sinatra, cardiologist from back east, he was attending a seminar in San Diego. So we went over and visited with him. We figured, well, he can help us, because cardiologists, they're dealing with electrical. And so we sat down with Stephen, and he said, Clint, he said, if you're affecting pain and he says, you need to be studying inflammation, because pain is a byproduct of oxidative stress or inflammation. And I had no idea what he was talking about, because inflammation back in around 2000, 2001 was you sprained an ankle and it ballooned up and it was sore and painful, and you put it on ice. And he said, no, that's not the kind of inflammation I'm talking about. He said, everybody has chronic inflammation. So anyhow, it still took me a while. But I was doing a little bit of research in the literature, and I ran across, how the immune system works and how white blood cells, for instance, if you have a pathogen or a damaged cell, and so the immune system sends a neutrophil over and it will encapsulate that damaged cell, and then it releases reactive oxygen, which is electrically charged molecules, and rips the electrons from the shell or the pathogen or damaged cell and destroys it. That's how the immune system works. And so, just cowboy logic, I said, okay, if if this is what's occurring, then and so when we ground people, it would reduce the pain. So what I recognized was that, and this was over a period of time, and I don't want to belabor this too much, but we kind of pulled it together by saying, okay, back in 1960, a lot of these modern health disorders were not prevalent in our, like there's an exponential curve of,
yeah, not as much.
Yeah, the rise of autism, lupus, MS, cancer, all of these things. But in 1960, we invented plastics, the synthetic plastics. The first thing we did was put them on the soles of shoes, so everybody could have shoes. And then we put them on, then we made carpets, synthetic carpets.
Oh my.
And so I started there, and then I recognized that the immune system is producing excess radicals, or there's not enough redox potential in the body to reduce these radicals. And so what they're doing is, if there's a leftover radical, and radical means it's electrically charged, means it's shorter plus electrons, and it can steal an electron from something. So if you reduce a pathogen and there's any excess radicals left, then they will go and steal an electron from a healthy cell, damage it, oxidize it. Then the immune system has to come clean that up, sending another neutrophil. So it's collateral, it's creating collateral damage, and it's like oxidizing a log, like the body's on fire. It's actually oxidizing tissue. So when you ground the body, then the body equalizes with the earth, because electrons migrate from the earth to the body so that they're equal. The body's equal with the earth. So you're both negative.
Okay.
So then I recognized, the reason we ground amplifiers and everything in the communications and electrical industry is to prevent fire, prevent charge. You cannot have charge in a grounded body. You can't have charge in a grounded amplifier. So that's where we went from. And so we just, then we started doing studies to see what the effects of this were. And we didn't do clinical studies in the sense, here's the effect that it has on MS or any particular disease. What we were trying to do was to take healthy subjects when we could find them. There's not a lot of them out there, and ground them and just see what the biological effects of grounding were. And the main thing that we found, and it took us about another 8 years actually to learn, that when you ground the body, that the red blood cells, they have an electrical surface charge. So when we ground the body, then we increase the negative surface charge on red blood cells by a factor of 2.7, almost 300%. And so now the red blood cells are more negative, and they repel each other. And so now they don't stick together. You don't have thick blood, and they can get in and out of the capillaries, oxygenate the tissue, and prevents inflammation, clean up the inflammation, clean up all of the debris, and so on. So, so it's really, we know what it is now and we know how it works. Um, it's just, but the concept is very simple. You can't have charge on a grounded body. So now we spend all of our time grounding people, and we use thermal imaging. We use lots of biofeedback equipment. We use lots of, like we would, the only way we could really study inflammation is we would take athletes, or like at the University of Oregon in Eugene, we took 20-year-old students that were healthy as could be, and then we would make them do knee bands, or so we would burn the calves so that in 3 days they shouldn't be able to walk from the delayed onset muscle soreness. And so the ones who were grounded didn't experience the delayed onset muscle soreness. The ones who did couldn't walk in 3 days. And so we learned that inflammation doesn't occur. When I say inflammation, this oxidative stress doesn't occur when you're grounded. So if you sleep grounded, which these athletes were, we grounded them for a week, and we drew blood every day, and they did MRIs, they did everything. We measured every marker in the body, and that was the only way we could really definitively say that grounding prevents inflammation. And other than that, it's, there's 25 peer-reviewed published studies now. They're all available on the earthinginstitute.net. And so I'm going to turn it over to you. Ask me where you want me to go from here.
Well, what is the easiest way for someone to be grounded, and how long should they do it?
Okay. First of all, how long should you do it? I have to say one thing. Everybody has pets. Animals who live in the wild, they do not experience inflammation-related health disorders. They don't have cardiovascular disease. They don't have cancer. They don't have lupus, MS, and so on. Animals who live indoors with their owners, they all manifest inflammation-related health disorders, and 50% of them on the average die from cancer. So this is an environmental thing. Okay, we've changed our environment. Before 1960, we were barefoot or we wore leather sole shoes. We were always naturally grounded. So I just want to preface that saying in nature, we would be grounded on the average 24/7, and you can't have inflammation when you're grounded. So what we've learned over the years is people whose health is very compromised, lupus, MS, significant health disorders, they need to be grounded. We started out grounding them during sleep. They had good benefit, but by 10 o'clock, their pains and stuff would come back. So then we would ground them for 12, 16 hours a day. Then they had significant improvements. People who are younger, but even our kids today are kind of challenged, with health disorders. And but the younger people are, the more they can. I mean, a half hour here or a half hour there, a couple times a day, they're going to get significant benefits. But the idea is, when we did our studies, the only thing that really worked was to ground, either ground the desk where people were sitting at a computer all day, put a mat on a desk so that when they use the mouse, their wrist, or when they're on the keyboard, their wrists are touching the mat, or they can put it on the floor. But you can't do anything when people are moving. So you have to do it when they're sitting or when they're sleeping. So the two things that showed up in our studies, everybody wanted the products. They wanted the things we used to do the studies. They wanted to take them home.
Right.
Then they come back.
Right. I'm already ready to want to know, how can I ground while I'm sleeping?
Right. So anyhow, then, but the business was kind of an accidental business. It kind of, just a demand that created. My original objective was I just couldn't. I was puzzled, and I was retired, and I needed a project. So a heck of a project. So, but anyhow, so then what we had to produce, we started out using cotton with silver in it, but the silver would oxidize too easy. It wouldn't last. So then we developed a carbon mat. It's kind of hard to explain with my hands, but anyhow, so one is a mat that it's 27 by 72 inches. You put it on your mattress underneath your sheet. Just put it on the mattress, plug it into the ground, and then put your sheet back over it and lay down and go to sleep. so you're grounded all night long. During sleep is when the body recovers. That's the most beneficial time to be grounded because it reduces the inflammation, and then the anxiety, irritability diminishes, and then it's easier to sleep. The number one reason people don't sleep is because of pain. And so, but the mat was the number one. The number two was the 20, about a 12-inch by 40-inch mat that you can put on we call it the universal mat. You can put it on your desk. You can put it in on the floor, put your feet on it. You can put it in a chair, put it in your, and sit on it. It's just a universal mat you can do anything with. But those are just, they're very rudimentary, very simple products. But that's all we can do at this point because they're just, this is really an educational thing. It's about talking and many times I ground groups of people, as little as 30 and as many as 1,500 for conferences. We'll ground them for, up to 3 days. And it's just remarkable the experiences they have when they're sitting in a conference for 3 days in a chair. And you put a patch on them, put a patch on their hand. I just show you, this is the first thing we ever did was just put an electrode patch and, a ground wire. And so if you have pain or if you have inflammation in 5-10 minutes, it's gone, an arthritic flare.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. I love that. Yeah. My kids have been asking me what I want for Christmas. I'm going to say I want to get grounded.
Well, I'll send you I'll be more than happy. If they didn't send you one, I'll make sure you get one. So, a set of this so that you can experiment with it, because
this is so fabulous because I've been suffering from inflammation. I think personally my cortisol was raised first, and then I had my injury.
Yes.
So I know I need to lower cortisol, and I know some of the things that I need to do would be, besides being grounded, what about our cell phones next to our bed? What should we do there?
Well, that's a whole different scenario. That's kind of, if you're grounded, they're not so much the problem. I mean, the issue about grounding is you're short of electrons. If you have any pain in your body, if you have any chronic health disorder, then your body is short of electrons, and you have inflammation because the pain is a message that something's wrong. So I wish they would have sent you something before the show.
I would have been like, yes, this works.
Well, yeah, nobody can believe what I'm telling you right now. You can't believe it. There's nobody on the earth can believe this until they experience it.
I'm excited. I'm really, truly excited to try it because some of the things I've done just innately, I wanted to take everybody outside instead of inside for the gym, because I felt like they were in their cubicles all day, and that it would be so much better for them overall to just get outside and work out.
Yeah. Did you watch the movie?
I watched the trailer.
Okay, then the Earthing movie is out now. It's on YouTube, so anybody can watch it. But it's an hour and 15 minutes, but it tells the whole story. And you have a lot of scientists, doctors, and subjects, people who had lupus or MS, arthritis, and so on, and some pretty significant people. We have an individual that was with the FDA for 30 years, talking about it. So it's kind of, this is something new, but it's really, really simple. But what happened is we accidentally disconnected from the earth and we lost our electrical ground. And
it makes perfect sense, really.
Yeah. And it's like you mentioned cortisol. The first study we did was cortisol because we wanted to measure stress. And we'd measure cortisol every 4 hours for 24 hours before the grounding. Then we would have them sleep grounded for a month, 6 weeks. And then we would go back and do the cortisol again. I don't have it in front of me, but in the Earthing book, I mean, it shows the cortisol charts. And but anyhow, before, everybody's cortisol was like spaghetti all over the place. And at 6 a.m., some people had extremely high. That means they were stressed, anxiety, irritability. And then most of the ladies that were involved had very low cortisol, meaning they had exhausted adrenals. And
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can totally attest to that in
yeah,
the just all the women I see.
right. And so anyhow, at the end of the study, then all of their cortisol synchronized. The older ladies came up, the younger ladies came down. And so they all synchronized into a perfect band. And then at midnight, if you're not sleeping at night, it's because your cortisol is elevated. And it could be because of pain or fight or flight stuff and so on. But but anyhow, so yeah, cortisol is one of the main things. And so this has, it normalizes the cortisol secretion profiles. And at 6 a.m. it's supposed to be the highest. 4 a.m., I mean, midnight to 4 a.m. it's the lowest. So you get your sleep, and then it starts skyrocketing at 4 a.m. And so, yeah, cortisol, what happens is, I remember at one time I was grounding a lady who had MS. And I mean, the doctors had told her, get a big TV screen and get one of those beds that go up and down because MS doesn't get any better. And I said, well, then we have nothing to lose. So we grounded her. But anyhow, I was visiting with her, and she would get lots of immediate pain relief. But anyhow, I asked her one time, I said, how long have you had MS? I said, you weren't born with it, were you? And she said, no. And I kept visiting with her. And then I asked her, well, what do you think caused this to manifest? And she said, I don't know. And about 20 minutes later, that's where I was fixing everything up. She said, oh my goodness. She said, that's when my mother died. And some other things went on in her life. And she went into an elevated sympathetic state, being cortisol driven. And the cortisol eventually creates, because she stayed in it too long. So the parasympathetic, which functions with adrenals, I mean, it usually modulates the sympathetic and prevents this sensitivities, but you exhaust the adrenals, and then the sympathetic overdrives, and that creates more cortisol. The cortisol creates inflammation, creates anxiety, irritability, often depression, and then that creates more pain, and then creates more cortisol. So it's a vicious cycle. So when you ground somebody, it stops that process. So anyhow, with this lady, and I can tell anybody, because I said, as soon as I put this patch on your hand, and the pain comes down, then I said, you no longer have MS, because MS is the immune system oxidizing and eating up the myelin sheath. So when you flood the body with free electron, that process stops. And so I said, now what you have is damage, lots of oxidative damage. And that's going to take a long time to recover. But the body is a self-healing mechanism. We know that if you have a cut or an injury or whatever, the body will return to normal unless something interferes with that process. And inflammation interferes with that process. So anyhow, I have to be careful, saying some things, but basically, all these modern health disorders, they're inflammation related. I mean, even autism now, John Hopkins came out 2 years ago and did some studies. This is an inflammation related health disorder. And, you can go back and identify what causes the inflammation. There's many different things, potentials. But so it's just, this is something everybody needs to learn about. And
It
then,
sounds like a very effective way of taking down inflammation compared to
yes,
just diet.
yes, well, diet will help.
Mm-hmm.
But what drives inflammation is more mental, because people who go into, let's say, fibromyalgia, MS, lupus, all of these chronic type health disorders, there's something feeding it. You can eat good food, but a lot of people still have it. And they have,
Right.
okay, so what's causing it to continue? It's mental, it's a loss, it's about loss. I lost my house during 208. I lost I lost my job. I lost a child. I lost a family.
Stress.
Yeah. So it's ongoing stress,
Mm-hmm.
and then they hold it, and they have anger
In their
sometimes.
body, they're holding it
Okay.
in their body somehow.
Yeah, and especially relationships. So as long as they're holding it,
Okay,
then they're triggering
that makes
a
perfect sense.
fight or flight, And that's, the first thing I often tell the little story
This is
here.
amazing.
It's like I spent when I was young, be just sitting there in the pasture sometime, nothing to do, but you watch the rabbits. And so some years you would have lots of rabbits, and they're the ones that have the big, the big ears. And whenever you had a lot of them, there'd be a lot of coyote around, and they were out during the day. But anyhow, the coyotes would tend to sneak up on the rabbit. The rabbit would sense the coyote, and the rabbit's just sitting there eating grass. And then all of a sudden his ears go up like this, and the coyote jumps, and the rabbit springs, and then the chase goes on, and the rabbit goes back and forth, zigzags across the pasture. The coyote chases him, but 99% of the time that coyote's going to run out of energy, and he will drop. The rabbit will run just a little bit further, and then he will stop, and then he's sitting there quivering. You can actually see him
Right.
shaking, and then all of a sudden he has this big shake like that, and then he goes back to eating grass like nothing ever happened. So so what's happened, I mean, in my own knowing, from our research and stuff, so basically he had a life-threatening event. Cortisol was elevated to the max. The chase took place, and now it's over. And so now he can ground it out. He can reduce the inflammation by, the electrons coming into the body. It reduces the inflammation that's created by all of the elevated cortisol and so on. So, but humans today, we still have a built-in natural fight or flight system, but our coyotes are different. It's the phone, it's getting the kids ready for school, it's picking the kids up, it's going to work, it's 100 different things. The bills
Yeah.
come, a bill is due and you don't have the money, or just whatever it is. The holidays are a good.
Are stressful. I was feeling overwhelmed because I'm like, oh, I'm trying to do a million things, and now I got to
Yeah.
get ready for the kids.
Yes, and so it's we need to ground out this stress, this daily stress. So if you can't do anything else, just take a chair, go outdoors, take your shoes off, put your feet on the earth, and just sit there and let it drain out of your body. Or if you only have a patio, then concrete patio, then maybe moisten it down a little bit, and then just put your feet on the concrete. It'll do the same thing. But you need to ground out that stress, that daily stress. Do it before you go to bed, because you're going to sleep better. If you get grounded and sleep grounded all night long, it's really going to have a significant effect, and you don't have to take time to go outdoors and ground. But
Right.
so it's this whole thing is about education, and it's about experience. So what I try to do, and especially with the movie, I know one thing: anybody who watches the movie, they're going to go outdoors and they're going to stand barefoot on the earth. I mean, that's the first thing they do. We've seen it and we hear it every day. It's only been out for 5 days now, but we've got 50,000, 100,000, I don't know what it views. But anyhow, so everybody's saying, you've got to do this, you've got to do this. So when we did the short, it went viral to about 100 million people. So I have a hunch the movie will do good.
I'm
But
excited to watch it. I plan on watching and sharing. So
yeah, it's the earthing movie. And so anyhow, I need to get you some product. I will, I promise. It'll go out today. And you need to experience this. What part of the country are you in?
Ohio. I was just thinking, is it too cold to go barefoot today?
Well, you don't want to go outdoors if it's freezing and below wind chills and stuff are down too low. But you can. I mean, your blood, when you go stand on the earth and it's cold, your blood is going to thin, and it's going to equalize with the earth, and then it'll keep your feet warm, keep your fingers warm. But when you put the shoes on, then you get cold, and your fingers and your toes get cold. And most ladies have cold fingers and cold toes, and as soon as you put a patch on them, they warm right
It
up.
changes it. It changes it.
Yeah.
So that's what patching is putting the.
Well, the patch, I use it to when we do seminars, because it's a hygienic way to ground people. But people who have acute flaring type health issues, if you have a flaring arthritis, you just put the patch right on your palm of your hand, and just sit there with it or sleep with it. It doesn't matter. and keep the fire out. Because as long as you have ground, then the fire is out. If you take it off and you stay too long ungrounded too long, and the pain comes back, whenever the pain comes back, it's time to patch, because pain is a
Is a
messenger.
sign of inflammation.
Yeah,
It's
it's
a
a messenger.
messenger.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so yeah, I've been working through the pain, I
right.
came up in the 80s when it was no pain, no gain. So I'm ready to
Yeah.
ground and get rid of that whole philosophy. And I see you have, like, I was reading that you had grounding chairs and
Yes.
a T cube. Explain kind of how that works.
Well, what these are, they're zero gravity type chairs like you would see in some homes, but also in clinics, um, IV drips, all those kind of things. Sometimes they'll put them in these chairs that recline. And so all we did was take the state-of-the-art chairs, and then the conductive material that we make the bed mats out of and the desk mats and so on, it comes in big sheets, big rolls. And so we would just take it to the manufacturer and tell them to put that on it instead of the regular material, and then have a snap on it so you can connect it to a ground. So when a person sits in it, first of all, everybody wants to sit in a grounded, zero gravity chair. And so we would take them to conventions or seminars, and we take like 6, 8 of them, and then we would let people sit in them for 30 minutes. And just life changing. It's life changing to ground somebody that in that big of a ground plane for 30 minutes.
Yeah,
And
because it's probably more effective. You're
yeah,
hitting more of the body.
right. The thing that, well, it's, yeah, it just takes, the more there is, the shorter it takes to get the results. This is perfect for just putting out pain, isolated pain, and eventually it'll clean up the whole body because your blood circulates, like once a minute. And so, but the zero gravity chair, I mean, I was absolutely surprised that over the people over 55, like a huge amount of them, like half the people over 55 sleep in these things. They sleep in recliners because of their pain, because of the health disorders. So giving them a ground plane to sit in, sleep in, I mean, it's really life changing. And again, nobody can really grasp this until they experience it.
Well, I love it. And you are one of your greatest success stories because you totally turned your own health around.
Well, yeah, I'm 76 now, and or will be shortly. And when I was 50, I had more pain than anybody. I remember going out in my backyard one day, and I looked up in the sky and I said, "God, why did you make my body with so much pain in it?" And then I realized He didn't, or whoever didn't. I did.
Yeah, right, right, right. Yeah.
But I don't have the pains at all. But I sleep grounded. I spend, like, I'm barefoot now, and I'm always barefoot, or because I have tile floor, saltile tile floor.
I love how in the movie you run barefooted, like in the trailer, you're running barefoot.
Yeah,
And I'm just like, this is such a freedom, like,
yeah,
feeling of just, and also it showed uh that you were the epitome of health, like, like,
yeah. Well, it's just nature. It's just nature. I mean, I have to eat good like everybody else. If you eat bad food, you're going to pay the price. And I have to keep my mind mentally.
keep it
Uh,
sharp.
yeah, I have to. I'm not a heavy meditator, but I spend a lot of time with Deepak and various people like that. But I do meditate, and I do have my ways to calm my mind, clear my mind, and don't stress out over every little thing that comes by. And if I do
Wow.
get stressed, go out in the backyard and stand on the grass and get some sunshine. So now you're getting your vitamin D and you're getting your vitamin G, and you can't be upset and mad when you're barefoot outdoors on the grass.
And I always tell people you can't be angry and do yoga. It just
Same, yeah, same
it
concept.
just it can't exist together.
Yeah,
Whatever it is has to
yeah,
just,
yeah. I do. I've done 2 studies on yoga so far, and it's remarkable, absolutely remarkable. Um, because and then we just finished a meditation study where we did brain mapping so you could actually see the differences between being grounded and not. And it's dramatic because when you're not grounded, you have all that anxiety and pain that you're normally dealing with. And when you are grounded, then the pain usually is gone in less than 10 minutes. And then your anxiety and irritability diminishes, your skin color comes up, your facial color, everything. And then you're happy. You're happier.
Oh, right. And so you lose the feeling of overwhelm and anxiety,
Yes. Yes.
pain, all good things to lose.
Yeah. Yeah. You calm the sympathetic nervous system. In fact, we did a study back in at the Hershey Clinic, the Children's Clinic in Pennsylvania, at the University of Pennsylvania, where they took 28 preemie babies. These are, and they're all suffering from the colics and this chronic fight or flight situation. So they have everything that you can imagine shows up in them. But we grounded them just with a little patch like I have here, and and almost instantly it normalized vagal tone, meaning it balanced the sympathetic came down, parasympathetic stabilized, their heart rate variability increased significantly, and they calmed down. And it was just instantly. Well, I tell everybody, I said, it's tested on
That's really
babies,
amazing.
guaranteed to work on adults.
Well, yeah. And I know like with, with grounding, you're getting all of that done, the relaxing. And I also notice it with meditation and yoga with the
Yeah.
deep breathing.
Hmm.
I feel that I get more grounded and centered in my body, my
Yeah.
mind and body.
Yes. Yeah. It's just, and it's one of the things with yoga that's really neat. We have a yoga mat coming out sometime early next year,
Ooh,
but
ooh, we could ground while doing yoga, right?
right. Well, that's the whole idea that the fellow who started Manduka, those
That's a great
nice
idea.
nice sticky mats, and so they're hoping to have it done here soon. And but what's interesting about that, when we did the study, what happens is if you don't have enough electrons in your body, then what energy you do have has you borrow it from here and borrow it from there, and it moves around in the body. But when you're grounded, then it's everywhere all at once. So it's easier to get up. You have a greater range of motion. You just feel better, and you don't have that. I mean, it's. But again, you have to experience it. Read the studies or experience it.
So
Yeah.
does our feet have to be connected either to these grounding pads or the earth? Or if I'm going barefoot in my house per se on wood floors
Well, the wood's not conductive. It will
to the
help keep.
earth?
It will help keep the static electricity off your body. But when you're laying down, your hands, your feet, your body is laying on this. So it's a huge ground plane. So you're well grounded. It's like laying outdoors in the yard. Um, the hands and the feet are the most conductive parts of the body, but that makes sense because in nature we're walking or we're touching live things with our hands. And but it's what can you do in our modern living environments? You can ground where you're at the computer, you can ground where you're asleep, or you can ground when you're watching TV. That's all you can do. And eventually we'll have grounded shoes, I hope. Somebody will. We keep working with a lot of different companies to bring those out. Nike,
Yeah, I was
everybody.
kind of curious if it was mainly the plastic soles or all shoes.
Well, it's the plastic sole of shoes. If you have a good leather shoe without a plastic liner inside, then eventually the perspiration from your feet will saturate the leather and they're conductive.
Nice, nice.
Yes. So, but moccasins are good, but they have to be just pure animal skin, or socks are great too, because socks, uh, the moisture from your feet are going to hydrate the socks. And so it's like when you go outdoors and stand on concrete, you pick your foot up, you'll see your footprint. That's hydration from your foot. So you have moisture in the body. So
So at the beginning, I meant to ask you because you were saying you packed up. Why did you sell your multi-million-dollar home and do all of this? What was in your mind at the time?
well, when I was starting to recover, one morning I woke up and I looked out the window and I for some reason, everything was vibrant. You know, the pine tree was, the needles were vibrant. The sky was blue and some clouds, but the blue was vibrant, meaning it had just a vibration
Life
to it.
to it.
Yeah. And so anyhow, uh, I looked around the room at that point, and I have this one beautiful piece of art on a wall on the other end of across from the bed. And I looked at it and I just had this epiphany. And I said, you know, I never owned any of this stuff, my home, anything. All I did was acquire these things. I spent my whole life collecting
Acquiring
things.
material
Yeah.
possessions.
And I had a huge amount of art and everything, and I loved it. But but anyhow, I recognized that, you know, I almost died, and the kids would have come and they would have taken a few things, but most of it they didn't want. And so I just recognized that, you know, I, I, I had to push. I didn't want to own anything. I wanted to get rid of everything I owned. It was just something that came over me.
I
I
love it. It's minimalist, right?
yeah, I wanted to make my life about something that I really, I wanted to get rid of all of it. And then what came to my mind is I wanted to make my life about something,
I love it.
so that next time I die, I can be happy with me. It doesn't matter what anybody in the world thinks, because most people don't care. But I wanted it to be important to me so I could die at peace. You know, that I was worthwhile. I did something worthwhile, rather than um, build television out and all of the things that we did there.
I love that. I love that. I read somewhere today where most of us have this fear of, like speaking in public, and it isn't about that we're really afraid. It's about we're afraid of what people will say, what
Hmm.
people will think, and we're
Yeah.
controlled by that. And
Yes.
they went on to say that most of those people that you're letting dictate how you live your life are not going to be at your funeral. So
No,
why are you letting them,
no. Yeah.
control your entire life?
Yeah. I remember one time my granddad said, and he was in his 80s at the time, and he raised his hand, and I was just a little kid. He says, if you have this many friends when you die, he says, you'll be the richest man in the world. And I didn't know what that meant, but when I went through my own thing, I don't think there were 5 people came to see me because they couldn't get off work, they couldn't fly, it was too complicated, and then they didn't want to see somebody that's going to die. I mean, there's
Yeah, right.
lots of
Too
weird
depressing
phenomena.
or something, right?
Yeah, a lot of weird phenomena going on there. But I didn't realize until I went through that wow, you know, people, if you have 5 friends, if you even have 3, what you call real friends,
Real
that's
friends, yeah.
yeah, that's a wealth. That's a real wealth.
It's
And
kind of eye-opening too, I
yes,
think,
hmm,
when you have a lot of possessions
yes,
and you look around and maybe you're in a relationship, maybe you're miserable, but
right,
you have all these things, and
uh,
all of a sudden all these things that you've acquired don't
yeah,
really matter because they're not
yeah.
bringing you joy.
No, no, they're, you know, yeah, but it's, I'll tell you, it is really refreshing to let them go. It's hard the first few
It's
days.
like a weight, right? You just
Right.
released a
Then
whole
all of a
weight
sudden,
you were
then all of
carrying.
a sudden you can walk down the street and your whole body is just lighter. Everything feels lighter, and you just feel more energetic.
Yeah,
And
I love that.
yeah, life is very simple.
Because you're really actually in touch with the things that really matter, I think, at
Right.
that point. And
Yeah.
we get like, I just feel like we just get overpowered by all of the things.
Right. Yeah. And then we watch TV all day long, or the internet or whatever, and it's all about consumerism. Our whole economy, everything in our lives is about consumerism. And, you know, what happened? I mean, what happened? We don't talk to each other anymore. We don't interact with each other. We don't
No
do the
connecting.
simple things that we used to do. And we don't have that richness of that interaction of community. I mean, we have a community, but not where you go out
Right.
and play
Not where you're
ball or,
really like
you know,
connecting. Like,
right. Hmm.
I think, so many people truly, they say loneliness is the new smoking. And
Yes.
so many people are truly lonely because, maybe they're on social media, but that's not true connection. True
No.
connection is having a barbecue with your friend, or,
Yeah.
having a conversation, spending
Yeah.
time together.
Yeah. I see it. I see it frequently. because I work with a lot of older people, and sometimes I go into their homes, and it's really sad. They don't have anybody that can come and spend time with them. Their kids are too busy working, and they're alone, and they're sitting
Oh,
there.
yeah.
They're sitting there, and this is having a dramatic. They all have pets. Those who have pets do much better, but those who don't have a pet, they would just as soon die as continue to go
Because,
on.
yeah, because it's just, I mean, it's sheer loneliness. So,
Yeah.
what is your recommendation on that front for people out there that may be feeling lonely?
Um, Start a grounding group. Go have
There you go.
barefoot parties in the park. You know, because anybody can join, and no matter what your creed or beliefs, or no matter who you are, everybody can join. The benefit's the same for everybody.
I love it. I love it. Well,
Yeah,
this has
yeah.
been one fantastic conversation today with you, Clint.
Oh,
And
cool.
do you have a book?
Yes, I have the earthing book. I
Okay.
don't know. I
I
don't know
thought
if
you did.
yeah,
Yes.
it's the
Awesome.
earth. It's the earthing book,
Yeah.
the most important health discovery ever, and it's won some nice awards and all that kind of stuff. But the reason that for the it's the most important health discovery ever. Everybody said you can't say that, and I said, well, it's free, and it has a dramatic impact on. I mean, if you get grounded, the body will return to normal. It's free, and so it
Yeah.
is most. It's most important. It's really a message from nature. We have disconnected from nature. We are, a part of nature. We have separated. We think we're different, but we are part of nature, and we are dependent on nature for our food, our air, our everything that we are. And this is a message. If you can just touch the earth and this occurs in your body, wait a minute, who are we? What are we doing? What have we done?
So
What are we
good.
doing to our children? We have to fix that one real quick.
True. So true.
Yeah.
So
Right.
how can
Grounded.
how can everybody get you on social media? I am going to include the movie in the show notes.
Okay. Uh, Social media, everything that ever gets posted, I put it out on my Facebook, Clint Ober, and then we have the Earthing Insiders, which is a group. There's 3 or 4 groups out there that you can. I'm not even involved with most of them, but they're just people who get involved, get excited, and they go out and put together these groups of 4 or 5 thousand people. And then, earthinginstitute.net, you can go there and ask questions, find anything out you want. All of our studies, all of that kind of stuff is published there, earthinginstitute.net. And then, earthing.com. It's all kind of interrelated, and there's a lot of people on Amazon. There's 200 or 300 people that import stuff from China and sell. It's kind of crazy how it kind of took off.
I
But
love it.
but the main thing that we try to do is really about education, and it's really about taking care of people. It's not about just selling people and trying to make a buck off of them, because this is important, and it's really important for the next generation. These kids, we have to get them grounded. We have to ground the shoes. We have to ground the schools, and we actually have grounded schools, classrooms, for special needs classrooms and so on. Dramatic improvements in how they feel, because these kids, they're all running around wearing rubber sole shoes, and they're all electrified with static electricity and all these charges. And they're wild. I mean, attention deficit. Well, of course, if your body's electrified and you're full of anxiety and irritability, then it manifests that way. It's not a disorder that you need to take a pill
I
for.
mean,
It's
you're saying the static electricity, and I just had somebody in my studio come in, and their hair, all of it,
yeah,
they were talking to me, but it was all standing up.
right.
And I just tried to keep a straight face because I didn't want to say anything. But
Yeah,
static
well,
electricity, she was electrified.
yeah, but that static electricity doesn't just reside on the outside of the body. It goes into the body, in through it's in your lungs and in your gastrointestinal. So you have charge. Well, the body's electrical. Body's the most electrical thing in the environment. So anytime you add environmental electrical charges to the body, you're influencing, you're perturbing electrons in the body, molecules in the body. So you've got to keep the static electricity off. That's a modern phenomena that in nature that does not occur. So
That's awesome. That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for coming
Well,
on today.
you
And
thank you. If you have any questions or anything, let me know.
oh, for
And
sure.
and and for sure, it's fun to share this, and it's the most important thing that I can do. So I
I
get up
love
every
it. I
morning.
love it.
Yeah,
So want to acknowledge you for being so gracious to come
yeah,
on and
yeah, yeah,
share all of your knowledge and all of the science. I mean, there's so much science
yeah,
that you
yeah.
get
A
to
lot of
see
science,
the
a lot of
movie.
it. Yeah, when you see the movie, you'll kind of understand some of it. So,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's,
So
but it's okay.
that we just got our toes wet today.
Yep.
We're gonna get grounded, you guys, and I'll let you know how it turns out.
Okay.
Thanks
And
everybody for listening to the Sisterhood of Sweat.
thank you.